Hey everyone, welcome to another wonderful demo days. It is Friday. It is also the end of January. How has everyone's January been? Pretty chill, huh? Right? Super chill January. Hello to everyone from Iran. Hello to our friends from India. Always happy that you stay up so late to watch us. So it's nice to see you all here. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, good night. Hope you all have had a good January and have an exciting weekend planned. Some of you may already be on your weekend. In any case, I'm going to bring in our friend Bryan. Hey, Bryan, how's it going?
Hey, AJ, what's going on? Good. I am well. Cannot believe it's already the end of January 2021. But here
Yes.
we are.
Yep, lots of folks here in chat today, so be sure to say hi to them. It's always nice to see lots of folks. But what are we going to talk about today to close out January?
Wow. This is only my second time on this platform, but I'm seeing Colombia, Turkey, Sierra Leone. That is definitely a first for me. So big shout out to Sierra Leone, Tunisia. Wow. I'm just going to stop because I think every country in the world is represented. So thanks, guys, for joining us and gals and everyone else. What an honor to have this much attention. Okay, well, so today what we're going to talk about are some of the releases that came out of GitHub Universe recently. In this case, what we inside of GitHub call I2C or Idea to Cloud, but which you as developers or users of GitHub probably just think of as things that make GitHub cool to use and make my life working in GitHub easier. So without further ado, let's switch over to the screen share, and we will take a look at the first of these items, which are discussions. So GitHub Discussions. So GitHub released discussions for teams a while back, and those have been pretty well received and pretty cool. But those are really oriented more around discussions inside of an organization, not really oriented towards the outside world. So for public repos now, you can configure GitHub Discussions. And the way that you do that is inside of your repo, click on the Settings tab, and then scroll down on that initial page until you get to the Features section here. And just click the box for discussions. It's as easy as that. And then when you scroll back up, you're going to see that there's now a discussions item on your repo. So what do we do? Well, let's click on discussions and see what's up. So when we set up discussions, GitHub provides a sort of a sample item here. So here is an initial discussion, perhaps, that somebody has started up. And I've already commented that I agree with whatever that is. But more than just saying, I agree or adding a thumbs up emoji or whatever, discussions are really oriented to provide a very basic sort of reflection of the sense of the community. So you can actually upvote things. So for example, I can take away my upvote and downvote it. Or I can upvote it. And I can upvote the original comment as well. And what that does is, of course, give us a simple but robust capability, basically to crowdsource stuff, right? So the same way that tools like Stack Overflow work, you can now work the same way inside of GitHub. So let's go back and just take a look at how discussions work in general. Obviously, if I want to create a new discussion, I just click on the big blue New Discussion button, and then I can select from categories. Right now, in a minute, I'll show you how you can create your own categories. Obviously, there's trade-offs there, right? The more categories you have, maybe the more granular you can split up your community. But of course, there's more maintenance and it can be more complex. So these are the 4 that are built in. So let's, for example, select a Q&A topic, and I could say, how do I enable discussions? They seem really cool. And we'll go ahead and start this discussion. And there it is. So there's the discussion. We can go ahead and participate with this. And we click back on the Discussions tab. It's there. Now, fundamentally, discussions are designed to be different from issues. So when we think of issues, they're to talk about an issue, right? So they're generally designed to be somewhat focused. We're talking about a specific thing, often in association with the work or the code that we're actually working on. And issues often lead to pull requests, right? So very much about specific aspects of our workflow. Discussions, on the other hand, are intended to be much more free form, much more open, and much more wide ranging. So for example, this might be a way for you to interact with your user community around broader questions like, how do I use your tool? What are the pros and cons of your tool? What are the philosophical implications of what you're writing here? Discussions like that. Now, earlier we talked about the ability to customize the list of categories, and you can certainly do that over on the left-hand side by clicking on the pencil icon. Here are the 4 categories that already exist. We can edit these if we want to, or we can create a new category. So I could call this, for example, Demo Days, discussions about demos, and we can choose from a couple of different formats. So a question and answer format will provide that upvote capability. Open-ended discussion is basically the same thing, but without that upvote capability. So we're going to go ahead and create this new category. It's there. I go back to my discussions homepage, and if I want to create a new discussion, I can now choose the Demo Days category. And there you go. So I have now created a new discussion. So this feature is in beta, but it is available. So go out and give it a shot. We're super interested in your feedback and would love to know how you're using discussions to really broaden the conversation and expand the reach, not only of the work you're doing, but of your thoughts, of your ideas, your influence on the broader world. So that's discussions. And next, I think we're going to move on and talk about some of the things that we're doing to make it easier to manage dependencies inside of your repos. So here's a common scenario. I've got a repository here. I've got a couple of commits into this repo. Everything's looking good. And as you can tell, there's no Dependabot. There's no Dependabot warning here, warning me that that I have issues with dependencies, right? It's completely clean, which is great. Except, of course, I'm going to need to add some dependencies, obviously, in order to finish my project. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to head over to my coding environment and want to make sure that I'm in the right repo. And we're going to check on our we'll go ahead and just do this by hand. So I'm going to go ahead and add a bunch of dependencies here. We'll copy those. I'm going to edit the package file. Actually, I'm not going to do that. Let's see if I can just do it from the command line. All right, so we've got our changes here. Let's push these up to GitHub. There we go. So there's add dependencies. All right, so I've already pushed this up to GitHub, and I need to create a pull request here. So let's go ahead and create a pull request and see what happens. So if we look at this pull request and reopen it, so that's my bad for not doing that ahead of time. Take a look at files changed, right? So really all we're really doing here is adding a whole bunch of open source dependencies. Now, our repo is pristine at this point. We don't have any vulnerabilities in our repo. But how do we know if that's the case after we merge this code, right? I can look in here and I can get a pretty good sense for the dependencies that are being added. It's a little bit harder to do that for the package lock.json file because that includes all of these sub-dependencies. For the package.json file, it's really big. It can be really hard to just sort of figure out what's going on. So we have expanded GitHub's rich diff capability to provide an intuitive look at these dependencies so that it's much easier for you to tell at a glance which dependencies are being introduced and which are being removed in a particular operation. So when I click on the rich diff button over here to the right, we can see all of these dependencies here in a much more readable and easy to understand format. So a couple of things to note. First of all, yes, it looks like if I merge this pull request, I will in fact introduce a vulnerability into my code. So I will destroy that pristine state of my repository. So cool, at this point, at the pull request stage, I can decide what to do about this. Do I want to go ahead and merge it and take care of it later, or do I want to take care of it right now? And this is just one aspect of what we at GitHub really mean when we talk about that industry buzzword, shifting security left, right? So we want to be able to be aware of and deal with all security issues as early in the development process as we possibly can. So in this case, I can prevent this vulnerability potentially from ever getting anywhere near my mainline branch. Okay, so that's a vulnerability. We also see the little plus icon here in the upper left. That means that this is being added. If it were a minus icon, that would mean that that dependency is being removed. And more than that, I can actually click on these individual hyperlinks here for each of these dependencies and go directly to the repo, for example, that contains that dependency if I want to do that. I can go directly to the dependency graph for that particular dependency, which obviously is going to be useful for me to be able to understand which dependencies I'm dragging into my package lock.json by virtue of this dependency. Basically just see everything in a nutshell. So you can do that rich diff for package lock.json, for package.json, and for other dependency formats supported by the GitHub dependency graph. So now I know what's going to happen when I head back over here and merge this pull request. Dependabot is so blazingly fast that in the time it takes me to take a sip of coffee, I think I have added some dependencies to my repo. So yep, there we are. So no longer pristine, but Dependabot, of course, has reliably and faithfully let me know that I have now got some vulnerabilities in my repository. Okay, so that is what we call dependency review. So if you want to look that up in the documentation or elsewhere, it's GitHub dependency review. This is available on public repos as part of the platform. It's available in private repos as a part of the GitHub Advanced Security, or GHAS, GitHub Advanced Security product. So again, interested in your feedback, love to know what you think about that. Personally, I, as a developer, think that everything that the GitHub can do to make me aware of security issues as early in the development process as possible will improve the security of my code, and ultimately, particularly for those of us developing for open source, improve the overall security picture for all of open source and software in general. Okay, dependency review. All right, so let's move on now and take a look at another capability that we introduced into the platform that we call pull request auto merge. And if you've ever heard me speak before, you know that I often say that I think that GitHub is a fantastic software company. One thing we're not super good at is naming things. So yeah, that's exactly what it is, auto merge. So here I've got another repo and I've got a pull request, but this pull request is broken because there is one of these build jobs is actually failing. So what can we do about that? And the answer is enable auto merge. Auto merge fundamentally is nothing more than merging a pull request when all of the conditions that are necessary for that pull request to merge are met. So for example, if you used branch protection to make a job required, as we have done here, then you can't merge the pull request until that job returns successfully. But with auto merge, we can do that automatically. So let's first of all figure out what's wrong with our code, and then enable auto merge after we fix it, and watch this just disappear. So it looks like somebody has actually broken the test. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go enable auto merge, and then I'm going to fix that. And then we're going to let that job run and see if this pull request just magically merges. So again, it's in the settings section. There is an allow auto merge button. This is a beta feature. Go ahead and check that. And then you have to enable it individually for each pull request. So when I go into this pull request, I can see that there's an issue. We're going to go ahead and enable auto merge. And now we're going to go and we're actually going to fix this test and commit it so that that job will run again. And we will see what happens. So let's edit. Let's go ahead and uncomment out the good stuff and comment out the bad stuff. We're going to commit this directly to the branch. And now as a consequence, when we come back over to the pull request homepage, there we go. Make sure I clicked on that. The job is actually running. So let's go take a look at that job. and see if it succeeds. This should actually go pretty quickly because I cut out all of the stuff that takes time. Basically, all we're doing here is your standard node stuff. We're going to build it. We're going to run CI, and then we're going to run npm test. And now that I fixed the test, it should actually work. All right, there we go. There's our test results. Love the full annotation in the logs. The job is complete. Let's head over to the pull request. Oh my goodness, it's gone because it auto merged. So if you are in a situation where you are sort of shepherding a whole bunch of pull requests through this process, this will save you from having to remember to go back in and actually manually merge all of those pull requests once the builds and tests are completing. So this is a feature that's been requested for a long time, and it's here. So pull request auto merge, a very, very cool capability. And by the way, before I forget, one of the coolest features that was introduced at GitHub Universe, again, something that's been asked for many, many years for GitHub, is this. I'm going to click on my personal profile up here. I'm going to click on settings down here in the middle of that menu. And then you're going to see this little new cartouche here and a completely new item in the account settings menu, which is appearance. And we have two choices here. I'm going to select dark mode, and boom, just like that, I've got dark mode. So what does it look like? It's actually quite lovely. Let's head back over to that pull request we were just looking at, for example, and take a look at what this looks like when it's rendered in dark mode. I just think it's absolutely lovely. So the colors are great. Folks did a ton of work on this, and in typical GitHub fashion, it's extremely smooth and just looks fantastic. So there you go, dark mode. I'm not sure that that's necessarily the best for demos like this, however, so I'm going to go ahead and turn mine back to light mode just while I'm actually on the air with all of y'all. So yeah, dark mode, check it out. It's in your settings now. If you have dark mode on everything else and you work in a dark basement, like I do sometimes, then GitHub won't be the only thing that's spoiling your ambiance. Okay, so now we're going to go on and check out possibly the most exciting, the most complex, and I think the most far-reaching and impactful of the features that we released at GitHub Universe, and that's something called GitHub Codespaces. Now, before I get into that, spoiler alert, we're going to talk about a demo that we're working on here that really exercises a lot of the other features that we released at Universe and that we've released since then. So if you weren't aware, we now support multiple, really as many environments as you like. You can have manual gateways so that somebody has to manually approve when code can be deployed to a given environment. And of course, you can also specify secrets that are scoped to a specific environment. Now, we're not focusing on environments. We did that a couple of weeks ago with James and his amazing demonstration. But again, I wanted to just make folks aware of these amazing capabilities. So this particular demo is interesting. What we're doing is we are creating a simple bookstore application and deploying it to not one, but two cloud platforms. So down here, I've got an Azure environment. I'm going to right click on that and open it. And I've got a GCP environment. So now I'm looking at the GitHub deployments. These are all the deployments to this environment. And when I click on View Deployment, I actually see my application. So this is this simple bookstore-like application on Azure. And if you look down here, we've included the version. So now we can make that tie back from the application artifacts that were actually deployed to our production environment. We can tie those back easily to a specific tag or release inside of GitHub. So here is the GCP deployment. I'm going to click that. And as you can see, I actually now have a real multi-cloud environment. So at some point soon, we're going to walk you through step by step how you too can set up a multi-cloud deployment leveraging GitHub Actions, GitHub Workflows, and GitHub environments. But that's not really the star of the show here. The star of the show here today is how we actually work on this code. So looking in here, you're going to see a couple of things that you might not recognize or that you might think shouldn't even be in this repository. So VS Code, what's that doing in there? These look like settings for Visual Studio Code that I might have on my desktop for my Visual Studio Code fat client, right? Setting up tasks, debug launch profiles, and things like that. Well, that's odd. Normally, we don't store that in the repository. And then there's this dev container folder. What's going on in the dev container? Well, I'll show you right after I fire up GitHub Codespaces. So I'm going to click on the Code tab. I'm going to click on the Code button as if I were going to clone this, but I've got more options now than I did before this release. And one of those is Open with Codespaces. So if I click on that, I'm going to see the Codespace that I created a couple of days ago for this repository, or I can create a new Codespace. What I'm going to do in this case, though, is go ahead and click on the Codespace that I created. So Codespaces are specific to an individual user. So each user would have their own Codespace potentially to work on a given repository. And what Codespaces are, think of it as Visual Studio Code with all the bells and whistles, all the settings, all the extensions, all the plugins, everything running in a container in the GitHub environment. So what does this mean and why do we care? While it's actually setting up, I'll tell you a little bit about what it's like to be a developer joining a new team or joining a new company, right? So one of the first things that you have to do is set up your environment. And this can take anywhere from a day to a couple of days to a couple of weeks, making sure that everything's installed, dealing with all the conflicts between the various things that you have to have installed in a workstation. Virtual machines can make this a little bit easier, but there's a lot of overhead around that as well. What Codespaces brings to the table is the ability to set up a standard development environment as a backer for essentially a web browser instance of VS Code. So as an administrator or somebody who's responsible for a development team, no longer do you have to allow developers days or weeks to get set up. Instead, and we'll go back and take a look at that dev container folder, you basically specify all of the settings and features that you want enabled in your Codespace for this particular repository. So Codespaces is running in a container, and you can specify what container that is. We've got that right there. You can, for example, forward ports. So in this application, we want to forward port 8080 out of the Codespace and 5432 as well for the debugger, so that we can actually run and debug code live in our Codespace the same way that we would in VS Code on our desktop. You can install any of the extensions that you like to use in your desktop version. There are no restrictions on those whatsoever, and you can even set up SQL tools and other interactive tools that extend the Visual Studio Code experience. So let's switch back over to our container, and we're actually looking at devcontainer.json and walk through some of the capabilities of this Codespace. So obviously everything works exactly the way that you would expect if you were using regular Codespaces. Let me show you what I meant earlier about the database capabilities. So down here, the SQL tools that are defined in my devcontainer.json right here, click on that. And if I click on the database and enter the password, and now what I've got essentially is an interactive SQL editor right here in my environment. So I'll just enter a simple query. We're going to run that on the active connection, and we should get some results back from my database. So this is the actual database that we are going to run. This is an in-memory version, or rather the container version of that database. So you can click on the Docker tab and manipulate all of the containers that are part of this application. You can also run your tests from inside of a Codespace as well. So if I click on the little beaker and I open up Bookstore Advanced and click on one of these tests, and I can go ahead and run these tests. Let's use the in-memory database for this because it'll probably be faster. And again, it works exactly the same way that tests would work on your desktop. In fact, it's pretty hard to tell whether or not you're in a Codespace or in your desktop environment. So the tests all run. We can, for example, click down here on the test results and we get the test report. So again, almost impossible to tell that you're not working on your desktop. Of course, as a developer, or at least for me as a developer, Interactive debugging is one of the most important things that an IDE like VS Code brings to the table. And of course, that's going to work just fine here as well. So I'm going to click on the debugging icon. My launch configuration, again, is already a part of the files that are part of the container that backs this particular code space. So I don't even have to set up my, my debug launch configurations. I'm going to go ahead and just start it up. It's going to start running. Obviously, it takes it just a little while to get going. And then we should be able to open up that particular to open up the application here. One thing that is a little bit random sometimes is where it tells you where the actual ports are. So yesterday when I was doing this, it was down here in this section. Now I can't seem to find where the ports are. And that is the demo gods biting me in the back of the neck for some reason. Perhaps I'm not living my best life. But typically, it's going to create a URL that you can access and actually interactively debug your application inside of your Codespace. And the last thing that I'm going to show, of course, is the fact that everything from Codespaces works exactly the way that you would expect. First, let me stop this. And then we're going to disconnect. And now I'm also going to stop Jetty here. All right, so all my services are stopped and I am good to go. Now, all of the tasks that I've configured for my desktop VS Code also work here. So for example, if I have a task that I've set up to add some code as part of this demo, I can do it right here. So I can just click on this and it's going to add a bunch of code for a feature that I want to add to my code. And then I can, of course, click on the source code section and push that code up to GitHub. So let's take a look at this application. Here is the pull request that we are looking to implement. Here is the star rating. Now, one of the cool things about this demo when we bring it out, and I think James used something similar to this a couple of weeks ago, is what we call issue ops. So we have set up workflows that are going to trigger when you attach a label to an issue. And in this case, I'm going to attach a deploy to test label. And when I do that, that's going to kick off a workflow that will deploy this application at this commit to a test environment. So I actually did that yesterday because it takes a while for all these workflows to run. And again, I can click on the deployment here and I can actually see my test version of this application once again with the tag down here at the bottom that allows me to relate this test instance of my application back to a specific commit, specific tag inside of GitHub. So notice in this case, we've got this star rating feature here at the bottom. This is the feature that we're adding, and it's not present in the production version of this application. So when I commit this pull request, all of this is going to get built and tested again. All of the containers are going to get built. And then the finished application will be deployed to both Azure and Google Cloud at the same time. And that star feature will again show up here in this production environment. So Codespaces, we could sit and talk quite a long time about Codespaces, but I really think the takeaway is this. First of all, it is a browser-based experience that is effectively exactly the same as the desktop experience for your developers. The advantage for teams and even individuals is that you can configure a standard development environment as a container and a specification in a repository and do that for all of your repos. So what does this mean? You hire a new developer comes to your team. Their ramp time, at least as far as setting up their environment is concerned, goes from a day, a week, in my case, it's usually like 2 weeks, down essentially to nothing. We have essentially completely eliminated the need to create your dev environment in the first place. And if you've done this sort of work for any length of time, you know that you periodically have to nuke your development environment from orbit in order to get rid of all the cruft that's accumulated and reset yourself back to that pristine state. So again, with Codespaces, never have to do that again either. As your needs change as a team moving forward, you can actually, again, collaborate on the dev container specification itself. So the folks that are responsible for maintaining Codespaces and your developer experience can, again, collaborate on the environment you're providing developers, because that environment is code. So in GitHub, we aspire to the ideal of storing everything as code in a way that it can be collaborated on easily by individuals inside of GitHub, diffed, built, compiled, and tested. So development environment as code joins infrastructure as code, joins configuration as code, and with GitHub Advanced Security, security as code. All right, so that's what I've got today. Again, we are highlighting our I2C, or Idea to Cloud releases today. Really what that means is the stuff that we are bringing to the table to just make your life easier, more fun, and more delightful. And of course, please don't forget that the star of the show, at least at the Universe presentation, was GitHub Dark Mode. So give Dark Mode a shot, check out Dependency Review, create some discussions, and spin yourself up some Codespaces. So pretty much at GitHub, I don't work anymore in my desktop VS Code IDE. I have shifted almost all of my workload over to VS Code, or rather Codespaces, just because it's so simple, it's so native, and so easy. All right, that's it. Thanks for joining me today. AJ, we can break and take any questions that may have come in on the stream.
Yeah, absolutely amazing. Like, you covered so much stuff today. So, like, if people want to dig into individual features or things that you talked about, other than rewatching this video and checking it out on YouTube, are there other places that they should go to dig into some of these newer features?
Yeah, so the GitHub documentation, of course. Oh, one thing I forgot to mention, speaking of documentation, is that Microsoft being Microsoft and GitHub being GitHub, we're not going to just leave you with a cool new feature like Codespaces without a literal ton of example container specifications. So you don't have to start from scratch. You can go to the Microsoft VS Code-dev-containers repo and avail yourself of however many there are in here. It's probably close to 100. And basically, you just pull this folder over, put it in your dev container folder, and you'll be using this particular configuration. So yeah, documentation, obviously check out VS Code-dev-containers and the GitHub community on the GitHub forums as well. So lots of places to go for additional information.
Awesome. And if anyone has any general questions, you can always go to github.community and ask over there. That's a great place to find out, what else is going on. There are always tons of things going on here at GitHub. And one more thing that is coming out really soon on February 4th is we're going to have a talk on what is next for DevOps. And that one's going to be a really cool panel. So if you want to check that out, I'm going to have the link to it at the end of the stream. But in any case, I think that was amazing, Bryan. Thanks a lot for today, and we'll see you again soon.
All right. Thanks, guys. We'll see you next.